takes us about a minute to come on with what's
We
left.
are live.
Yeah, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram all at the same time. And Anastasia and I are on our respected channels, so it's about 6 channels we're on all at once. So that's why some of the times it takes some time to come on the air. Anyway, it's 11 o'clock. It's Tuesday, and it's time for Sand to Sold, where we talk about real estate in Los Angeles. I'm your co-host Stuart Fournier. I'm a 26-year veteran of the real estate world here in Los Angeles, and it's my pleasure to introduce my co-host.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anastasia Bonholzer. I am a mortgage broker in the South Bay, and I'm with AMS Mortgage Services, and also known as your loan queen. I am here at the helm.
And she has her own audience. This is amazing. I didn't know your cat could clap so much in the background there.
I can. It's given me a lot of money. I've been very fortunate in the last 3 months since I've had the cat, and I'm going to continue to. Yeah, my lucky cat of Japan will stay behind me every time he
Oh,
goes like this. That's an extra escrow. So imagine
I love
we're
it. I
ringing
love it.
escrows here.
Welcome, everyone. We invite your comments. We invite your participation. You can come on the air right now with us and ask a question, or just simply, you know, pose on the comment section anything you'd like. We love the hearts. We love applause. We love it all. We're very hungry for it all. No, just kidding. Anyway, today's topic, we wanted to talk about the fact that you may be closer to owning property than you think. It breaks our heart that it's so difficult, and let's face it, it is very difficult to buy property in Los Angeles, and particularly the South Bay, where prices are very high, and we get that. And we're constantly scouring ways to introduce people. And I think sometimes people just get so discouraged they put it off to the side and they don't realize, you know what, they're there. They're actually ready to buy, and they don't realize it because it seems like such an unattainable mountain. So, we're going to reflect on that a little bit today, and we're going to talk about how you may be closer than you think. Now, I don't know if this is a golden rule by any means in our area or in Los Angeles. Anastasia, maybe you can correct me on it. But sometimes we get calls from people that are renting, and I see people spending anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on a rental. And the first thing that pops in my mind is pretty much anybody spending more than $4,500 a month in rent should be looking at the possibility to buy. Certainly, people that are in the $8,000 or $9,000 range. What are you doing? You're throwing your money away. So,
Most definitely.
what's your feeling about that? Is that kind of a good guide to start
Yeah, that's
thinking?
definitely a good range. And it could even be individually. Like, just to give you an example, right now I'm helping three brothers purchase their first property. The youngest brother is 20, then the second in line is 26, and then the older one's 31. So, three brothers coming together to purchase a property. They each currently pay $2,000 for rent. So they collectively could pay at least $6,000 if we combine it all. And now they rent a property instead of renting individually. They can now own a property together, and that's typically how it's done. The first property, it could feel unaffordable, but after we do the math, most of the time it makes sense to buy. So in this case, their budget has moved from 6,000 to 7,000, and now they can afford a $900,000 single family. Now we're looking in Carson for a 5 bedroom. So there's definitely ways to do it, and house hacking is one of them. Buying a multifamily is another, where automatically you buy a home and then your tenant offsets your mortgage by a fraction. So that's more affordable. Coming together, buying with friends and family, as long as there's a legal understanding of the structure of that deal, that's definitely an option. And so there's definitely ways to buy it where it hurts less to the wallet, right? It's
Right.
psychologically it may hurt, but when we break out the numbers, it makes complete sense.
And unfortunately, well, or fortunately, because I don't think buying property is an unfortunate thing, and by any means, even if you're in a partnership, uh, that is the way to get creative. That's the way to think in terms of buying in the South Bay, or in Los Angeles. And that's not necessarily something that you're going to do in lower end parts of the country where it's a lot less expensive because there's a lot of what we're talking about is kinship too when you have a lot of partners and things like that, and you do have to get along, and depending on how you get along really demonstrates how much of a long-term investment you're going to have. But I'm getting off track a little bit. What I mean to say is that nowadays, just as it is important to understand how relative your financial future is tied to real estate, you do have to do a little more homework in the area, in our area. You do have to look at more opportunities. And
Yeah, and I
one,
like the buyers to come in and to do, yeah, and I like the buyers to come in as early as possible in the process. We could be talking about the need to purchase, maybe 3 years out. And I come in with a concrete plan of how much money. First off, where are we trying to buy? Location, then sets the budget. So if we're trying to buy a condo, single family, where's the budget? How much money do we need for closing? And then working backwards, we can determine how much income do we need to support the mortgage we want. And so
right,
that's a mathematical equation. We can give you that math, essentially 3 years in advance. So then somebody has that time to prepare themselves.
right. And, I've mentioned this book before for those of you that look, the first thing you need to do is get yourself educated. And it's obvious that we're partial to real estate because that's what we do day in and day out. But if you really want to get a cross section of investments in general, and in this book, it really does weigh things out. It's called The Algebra of Wealth by Scott Galloway. I highly recommend it. It's a fast read. It's something that you can get a good sense of if you're in that bracket, if you're in the bracket where you're spending, close to $10,000 a month in rent. You've worked very hard to get to that level in your profession, obviously. And in fact, you don't need as much money to put down as you used to. It used to be that solid 20%, otherwise you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
That's still the preferred way to get started, but it's not by any means the only way to get started
Yeah.
anymore. People
And
are
I want to
getting,
articulate here as, yeah, and I want to articulate if somebody is short, there's definitely ways to come up with the difference. Like if somebody's, I must put 20% down, I just don't even want to think about ownership until after I remove the mortgage insurance or whatever their reasoning is. There's ways to come up with the funds. One of the ways, which is the most common, is to loan against a 401k. As long somebody is, most employers provide WK, WK, W 401k, which you then pay into every month. Um, the rule of thumb is you can borrow half or up to 50,000 of the 401k. So if you have a husband and wife, and they've been at their job for a few years, and maybe they even rolled over their 401k into their current job, and they have over 100,000 in there, which is very possible for somebody in their 40s to have well over 100,000 in there. They each now can take up to 50,000, and they each now have $100,000 to put down as a down payment for closing costs and down payment. And that's a way to
okay,
supplement whatever other money they have saved.
right, right.
That's
And one
very
of,
common. I would say they very common to do that.
one of the biggest mistakes I see buyers make is it's understandable. We talked about this before. It's hard for people to move forward on such a big ticket item. Psychologically, we get that. But one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they actually do have, say, 10, 15, 20%. They think they have to have the 20%, and they say, okay, wait till next year, because by next year I'll have that
Yeah.
20%. But in the meantime, guess what? Property values have gone up. So you start to chase your tail after a while. If you have anywhere from
Mhm.
10 to 15 to even close to 20%, do not wait. Because if you wait, it'll just be 1 year after another, after another, after another, where you're chasing the market. Now, you can say
Yeah.
I'm, being a little hypocritical because prices do come down, but what we've seen for so many decades now is that yeah, value does come down, but it comes down temporarily, and then it goes straight back up again. So don't get yourself in
Yeah.
the trap of always
Is it
thinking,
true
okay,
that the rule of thumb is Is it true that the rule of thumb is that the property values double every 15 years? Is that still true in terms of, how South Bay has been? Because I feel like that's a ballpark that we've seen out there, and I'm not sure if that's a national average or if there's any relevance to our local market here.
So it's certainly not national. I wouldn't ever say that. But yeah, locally, it's fair to say that is exactly what's happened. The biggest example, of course, is 2008 when we had the biggest crisis in, 100 years or whatever. We came back double, if not more than that, right? So it's not a gauge by which, we want to pretend that it's going to happen all the time. It happened for a lot of different reasons. We had incredible industry move into the area in the last 15 to 20 years. All the dot coms moved
Yeah.
in,
With the aerospace.
the
Yeah.
aerospace and everything else. And to have all those variables happen again is pretty unpredictable. But the bottom line is they
Yeah.
came and they've stayed. And with the increase in population, I often say that you're pretty safe unless humans decide they don't want to procreate anymore. There has to be room, and it
Right.
speaks to a lot of
Most
the struggles
definitely.
we have with development around the area. Bottom line is we're very solid. We will be for the foreseeable future. So, in answer to your question, it's true, but you know, you're. I guess the good news is you're always in a solid base where once you get involved in buying and once you have ownership, your options are fantastic, especially long term, right? And
Yeah.
that's what this show is all about.
Yeah.
The
Most
other thing I
definitely.
want to mention, Anastasia, and I know you have a lot more education on this than I do, although we are not tax experts, neither one of us. Let me just say that right up front. Anastasia, you can say it too, just to protect yourself. But the bottom line is that if you just do something very simple and take a look at your paycheck right now, and again, this is sort of a benchmark. It's not obviously your particular situation if you're watching this, but imagine your paycheck. Take 10% of your paycheck and stop giving it to the government and start applying it to being taken off the actual payment that you get. In other words, instead of giving that 10% to the government at the end of the year, which they asked for, the government actually wants you to buy property. The government encourages home ownership because home ownership contributes to
With the
about
tax incentives. Yeah.
exactly. Home ownership for the nation contributes to about 80% of the economy. In some way, shape, or form, all of the economy is related to real estate up to the tune of about 80%. So the government wants you to go out there and they don't want their 10%. They'd rather have you invest it in yourself because it helps the economy. So, as a rule of thumb, am I correct about that? Is 10% pretty much what people can write off?
Yeah, it actually has increased since the salt tax deduction has gone up, which is the amount of property taxes you can deduct off of your income. So yeah, always consult a tax professional. It depends on the structure of someone's pay, what tax bracket they're in, but there are definitely many ways that you can deduct. Even most recently in 2026, you can deduct now mortgage insurance off of your taxes. For many years, that wasn't an option. So if somebody is coming in, 5% down, they don't have the 20% saved, and they do have mortgage insurance on the loan, they can now deduct that up to a certain amount. The interest on the loan is deducted up to a certain amount. If you are self-employed,